Most people think stubborn weight gain comes from eating too much or moving too little, but that's a myth. The real culprit is chronic inflammation. Inflammation is the body's alarm system, a short-term protective response meant to heal damage, fight infection, or neutralize toxins. It's supposed to switch on briefly, do its job, and then switch off. But in our modern world, with processed foods, sugar spikes, chronic stress, environmental toxins, and disrupted gut microbes, this system never shuts down. It stays stuck in a permanent on position. And that's when the body begins to malfunction. When inflammation becomes chronic, it signals the body that it's under constant threat. Your metabolism slows. Insulin becomes less effective. Fat burning shuts off. Instead, your body starts storing fat, particularly visceral fat, the dangerous kind that collects deep around the organs. And here's the cruel twist. Visceral fat itself produces more inflammatory chemicals, which then fuel even more inflammation. It's as a self-perpetuating loop, Hef. The more inflamed you are, the more visceral fat you accumulate. The more visceral fat you carry, the more inflamed you become. So you can count calories, exercise harder, even try fasting. But if inflammation is smoldering beneath the surface, your body will resist weight loss at every turn. This isn't about willpower, it's about biochemistry. The solution isn't to eat less and move more. It's to turn off the fire. Once inflammation is addressed at its root through nutrient-dense, anti-inflammatory foods, gut repair, proper fasting, and restoration of mitochondrial health, your metabolism reawakens. The body no longer needs to hoard fat for survival. It shifts back into healing, repair, and energy production. That's when fat loss becomes as natural, effortless, and sustainable, because you're finally working with your biology, not against it. Chronic inflammation is not the dramatic, painful swelling you notice after an injury. It's quieter, more insidious, a low-grade internal fire that never quite goes out. In biological terms, inflammation is simply the immune system's attempt to defend and repair. When we cut a finger, catch a virus, or breathe in a toxin, our immune cells release chemical messengers that create redness, heat, and swelling to destroy invaders and start healing. That's acute inflammation, short-lived, purposeful, and essential for survival. But when the triggers never stop, the immune response doesn't either. The fire that was supposed to burn briefly now smolders indefinitely. This is chronic inflammation, subtle, persistent, and damaging at a cellular level. It doesn't cause the obvious pain or fever of acute inflammation, but it quietly erodes health day after day. The immune system, meant to be the body's protector, becomes its own worst enemy, attacking healthy tissues, altering hormone signaling, and disrupting metabolic balance. On a cellular level, chronic inflammation scrambles communication between cells. The chemical messengers that once coordinated repair and energy production now send mixed or false signals. Mitochondria, the tiny powerhouses inside each cell, become collateral damage. When mitochondria are inflamed, they can no longer efficiently convert food into energy. Instead of generating ATP, they begin producing excess free radicals, further fueling inflammation. This mitochondrial dysfunction is one of the key reasons the body shifts from energy burning to energy storing. Then there's cortisol, the stress hormone. Under normal conditions, cortisol helps control inflammation and mobilize energy, but persistent inflammation keeps cortisol levels elevated. Chronically high cortisol tells the body it's in danger, and when the body feels unsafe, it conserves energy by slowing metabolism, raising blood sugar, and storing fat, particularly around the abdomen. This is why so many people with chronic stress and inflammation develop a visceral fat. Even when they eat well or exercise, the hormonal message is simple. Hold on to fat, we're under threat. From an evolutionary perspective, this made perfect sense. Our ancestors only experienced inflammation when they were injured, infected, or starving. Once they healed or ate again, inflammation switched off. Their bodies had time to rest, detoxify, and rebuild. Today, however, that natural rhythm is gone. The modern environment is designed to keep inflammation switched on. Every bite of processed food, every late night, every burst of psychological stress tells the immune system, we're still in danger. Processed vegetable oils, refined sugars, and chemical additives bombard our system daily. These foods inflame the gut lining, allowing toxins and bacteria to leak into the bloodstream. The immune system detects this as an attack and launches another inflammatory response. Air pollution, pesticides, plastics, and heavy metals add to the burden. Even emotional stress acts as a biochemical toxin. It raises cortisol, activates immune pathways, and increases oxidative stress in the brain and body. Over time, the result is a metabolic gridlock hat, a body trapped in inflammation, unable to burn fat efficiently. This is why people can follow a perfect diet or training plan and still see no progress. If inflammation is simmering beneath the surface, the body refuses to release fat. It's a protective adaptation, not a failure of discipline. The body is simply prioritizing survival over appearance. It will not risk burning stored fat while it believes it's still fighting for its life. In Dr. Myhill's clinical view, this chronic, hidden inflammation lies at the core of nearly every case of stubborn weight gain, chronic fatigue, and metabolic dysfunction. The goal isn't to suppress the immune system, but to thus retrain it to remove the constant triggers, restore mitochondrial efficiency, and calm the internal alarm system. When the immune system can finally rest, cortisol normalizes, energy returns, and fat loss begins naturally. The body stops defending and starts healing. Understanding chronic inflammation through this lens changes everything. It's not about fighting your body. It's about listening to what it's been trying to tell you. The excess weight, the fatigue, the cravings, these are not random symptoms. They are signals of an inflamed, overworked system asking for calm, nourishment, and repair. When inflammation cools, energy surges back, metabolism reignites, and weight loss becomes not just possible, but inevitable. Visceral fat isn't just the soft padding you can pinch around your waist. It's the dense, internal fat packed deep around the liver, pancreas, intestines, and other vital organs. Unlike the fat just under the skin, visceral fat is metabolically active. It behaves more like a rogue endocrine organ than a passive energy store. It releases powerful chemical messengers called inflammatory cytokines, such as interleukin-6, tumor necrosis factor alpha, TNF, and C, reactive protein CRP. These molecules circulate through the bloodstream, spreading inflammation far beyond the abdominal cavity, reaching the brain, blood vessels, and every tissue in the body. This is where the real damage begins. Once these inflammatory chemicals enter circulation, they signal the immune system to stay switched on. Even when there's no actual infection or injury to fight, they interfere with the body's normal metabolic controls, altering how cells respond to insulin, how fat is stored, and how energy is produced. The result is a constant biochemical storm, an inflammatory feedback loop that drives weight gain, fatigue, and disease from within. When inflammation rises, insulin sensitivity drops. Insulin is the hormone that allows glucose to move from the blood into cells for energy. But under chronic inflammatory stress, cells stop responding properly to insulin, a condition known as insulin resistance. The pancreas compensates by pumping out even more insulin, which in turn tells the body to store more fat. And where does that fat tend to go? Straight to the visceral region, deep around the organs, where it can do the most harm. This isn't accidental. It's the body's misguided attempt to quarantine inflammation and protect vital systems from damage. However, this strategy backfires. The more visceral fat that accumulates, the more inflammatory cytokines are released, which further block insulin sensitivity and encourage even greater fat storage. It becomes a vicious, self-reinforcing cycle. Inflammation creates visceral fat, and visceral fat sustains inflammation. Over time, this feedback loop drives up blood sugar, cholesterol, and triglycerides, setting the stage for metabolic syndrome, the dangerous cluster of conditions that includes obesity, high blood pressure, insulin resistance, and fatty liver. Visceral fat doesn't just affect metabolism, it disrupts the body's entire hormonal balance. It produces excess leptin, a hormone meant to signal satiety and regulate appetite. But when leptin levels remain chronically high, the brain becomes resistant to its signal, leading to constant hunger and cravings. At the same time, inflammation suppresses adiponectin, a hormone that normally enhances insulin sensitivity and promotes fat burning. Low adiponectin levels lock the body into fat storage mode. It's a perfect storm of hormonal confusion. The signals that should tell the body, you've eaten enough, start burning energy, are completely drowned out by inflammatory noise. In Dr. Myhill's view, visceral fat is both a marker and a driver of inflammation. It's the physical manifestation of an internal imbalance, evidence that the body has been stuck in emergency mode for far too long. The mistake most people make is assuming they can burn it off through more exercise or fewer calories. But you cannot out-exercise inflammation. When the inflammatory fire is still burning, the body simply resists fat loss. Every calorie deficit becomes a stress signal, pushing cortisol even higher and driving more fat to the abdomen for protection. The only way to break this cycle is to target the inflammation itself. That means cooling the internal fire through anti-inflammatory nutrition, stable blood sugar, restorative sleep, and controlled stress responses. When inflammation begins to subside, cytokine levels fall, insulin sensitivity improves, and the hormonal chaos begins to normalize. The body no longer feels under siege. It becomes safe again to burn fat rather than store it. Once that shift happens, visceral fat begins to melt away naturally, not because of restriction or punishment, but because the biological need for it disappears. The immune system quiets, cortisol lowers, and mitochondria regain their efficiency. Energy increases, cravings diminish, and metabolism resets to its natural rhythm. The real key is understanding that visceral fat is not just an aesthetic issue. It's a metabolic warning light. It tells us the immune system has been hijacked by chronic inflammation. The solution lies not in the gym or in counting calories, but in calming the storm inside. When the inflammation visceral fat loop is broken, the body stops fighting itself and begins to heal. Only then can weight loss become effortless, sustainable, and truly restorative. Hormones are the body's chemical messengers. They control hunger, energy, metabolism, sleep, and mood. When they're in balance, everything works in harmony. Food turns into energy, appetite follows natural rhythms, and fat storage is tightly regulated. But when inflammation becomes chronic, that delicate hormonal network begins to collapse. The immune system, meant to defend, now interferes with the very communication system that keeps metabolism stable. One of the first systems affected is the thyroid, the metabolic control center. Inflammation interferes with thyroid hormone conversion, specifically the conversion of inactive T4 into active T3, the hormone that determines how efficiently your body burns energy. High levels of inflammatory cytokines such as IL-6 and TNF-alpha slow this conversion process, leaving cells functionally hyperthyroid even when blood tests appear normal. The result is fatigue, cold hands and feet, brain fog, and a stubborn inability to lose weight. It's not that the thyroid gland is broken, it's that inflammation has muted its signal. At the same time, inflammation wreaks havoc on leptin, the hormone that tells the brain you've had enough to eat. In healthy metabolism, leptin levels rise after a meal, sending a signal to the hypothalamus. We're fed. You can stop eating. But when inflammation is present, this signal doesn't get through. The brain becomes resistant to leptin, much like cells become resistant to insulin. The body is flooded with leptin, yet the brain interprets it as a deficiency. It believes you're starving, even with plenty of stored fat. In response, it triggers hunger, cravings, and fatigue to drive you to eat more. Meanwhile, metabolism slows to conserve energy. This is why people with chronic inflammation often feel constantly hungry, but gain weight easily. Inflammation also contributes directly to this: insulin resistances, the condition in which cells stop responding to insulin's signal to take in glucose for energy. Cytokines interfere with insulin receptors on the cell membrane, blunting their ability to respond. The pancreas responds by producing more insulin, which further promotes fat storage, particularly in the abdomen. The excess insulin also prevents fat breakdown by inhibiting the enzyme lipase. So, despite eating less or exercising more, the body stubbornly holds on to fat. High insulin and leptin resistance together create a metabolic environment that's almost impossible to burn fat in. Then there's cortisol, the stress hormone released by the adrenal glands. Inflammation keeps cortisol levels elevated as part of the body's attempt to control immune activity. But prolonged cortisol elevation is highly damaging. It increases blood sugar, breaks down muscle tissue for fuel, and signals the body to store fat, especially visceral fat around the belly. From an evolutionary perspective, this was adaptive during famine or infection. Storing energy near the vital organs helped survival. But in modern life, with constant psychological stress, processed food, and inflammatory triggers, this mechanism never turns off. The body is trapped in a state of perceived emergency, always preparing for crisis, never feeling safe enough to burn fat. This hormonal chaos explains why so many people feel exhausted, hungry, and frustrated despite doing everything right. When inflammation blocks thyroid function, metabolism slows. When leptin signaling fails, hunger increases. When insulin resistance develops, the body stores fat even when calories are restricted. And when cortisol remains high, energy plummets and fat accumulates around the abdomen. It's not a failure of willpower. It's a failure of communication between the brain and the body. The symptoms are unmistakable once you know what to look for. Persistent fatigue even after sleep, strong sugar or carbohydrate cravings, mid-afternoon crashes, cold extremities, irritability, and slow or non-existent weight loss despite clean eating. These are not separate problems. They're different expressions of the same underlying process: inflammation-driven hormonal disruption. Dr. Myhill's clinical experience shows that the only way to restore proper hormone function is to calm the inflammatory load. When inflammation subsides, cortisol normalizes, leptin sensitivity returns, and insulin can once again guide glucose into cells instead of storing it as fat. The thyroid begins converting hormones efficiently, and energy levels rise naturally. Hunger decreases, fat burning switches back on, and metabolism returns to its proper rhythm. The lesson is simple but profound: you cannot fix hormonal imbalances without addressing inflammation first. Diets, supplements, and exercise routines will continue to fail if the underlying biochemical fire remains lit. Once inflammation is resolved, the hormones begin to communicate clearly again. The body stops hoarding energy and starts using it. That's when true metabolic healing begins, not through restriction, but through restoring the body's natural intelligence. The gut is the command center of inflammation. It's where the immune system, metabolism, and microbiome meet. And when it's damaged, the consequences ripple through the entire body. In a healthy gut, the intestinal lining acts as a strong barrier, allowing nutrients to pass through while keeping bacteria and toxins safely contained. But when the gut becomes inflamed or imbalanced, that barrier weakens. Tiny gaps open between the cells of the gut wall, allowing bacterial fragments and toxins, known as endotoxins, or lipopolysaccharides, LPSCs, to leak into the bloodstream. The immune system detects the endotoxins as invaders and mounts a defensive response. That response is inflammation. What begins as a local gut issue turns into a vast systemic inflammatory cascade, with immune cells releasing cytokines throughout the body. The result is fatigue, poor metabolism, brain fog, and persistent weight gain. The gut, meant to be a site of nourishment and balance, becomes a chronic source of alarm signals. The immune system is constantly on high alert, never standing down, and this continuous activation is one of the main drivers of visceral fat accumulation. The body stores fat, particularly around the organs, as a protective buffer against inflammatory toxins circulating in the blood. The microbiome, the trillions of bacteria, fungi, and microbes living in the gut, plays a crucial role here. A diverse, balanced microbiome produces short-chain fatty acids, SC fasciculars such as butyrate, acetate, and propionate, which have powerful anti-inflammatory effects. Butyrate, in particular, nourishes the gut lining and helps maintain its integrity. However, when the microbiome is disrupted by antibiotics, sugar, alcohol, or processed food, the beneficial species decline and harmful bacteria thrive. These harmful microbes produce more endotoxins and fewer protective compounds, feeding the inflammatory fire. Dr. Myhill often describes this as a nice immune overdrive problem. The immune system is not attacking for no reason. It's responding to constant provocation from the gut. Every time you eat processed food, industrial seed oils, or refined carbohydrates, you're effectively throwing fuel on that fire. These foods damage the gut lining, destabilize blood sugar, and feed the wrong microbes. The result is a continuous trickle of Todd stream that keeps inflammation switched on the 24/7. Repairing this damage starts in the gut. The first step is as removing the irritants processed sugars, gluten, vegetable oils, alcohol, and synthetic additives that inflame the intestinal wall. These foods increase permeability and disrupt the microbiome. Instead, focus on whole, unprocessed foods, clean proteins, healthy fats, and abundant vegetables rich in fiber and polyphenols. Fiber acts as food for beneficial gut bacteria, encouraging the production of butyrate, which in turn helps seal and heal the intestinal lining. Next comes repopulations, restoring a balanced microbiome through probiotics and fermented foods. Natural options such as sauerkraut, kefir, kimchi, and live yogurt deliver beneficial bacteria that help crowd out harmful species and rebalance the ecosystem. Clinical evidence shows that certain probiotic strains can directly lower inflammatory markers like CRP and TNF-alpha. But these microbes only thrive if they're properly fed, which is why prebiotic foods, garlic, leeks, onions, artichoke, resistant starches are essential to maintain long-term gut balance. The final step is S repair and renewal. Nutrients such as zinc, glutamine, omega-3 fatty acids, and antioxidants support gut healing and reduce oxidative stress. Omega-3s from fish oil, flax, or chia help to dampen inflammation at the cellular level. Glutamine provides fuel for the intestinal cells to regenerate, while zinc strengthens the gut lining and immune regulation. This three-step approach, remove, repopulate, repair, creates the foundation for metabolic recovery. Once the gut barrier is restored and the microbiome stabilized, endotoxin leakage slows dramatically. The immune system finally receives the signal that it's safe to relax. Inflammation levels drop, cortisol normalizes, and insulin sensitivity improves. The body no longer feels under attack and begins releasing stored fat, particularly from the visceral region. Energy increases, cravings fade, and digestion becomes effortless. This is why every attempt to lose weight or reduce inflammation must start with the gut. You cannot heal the metabolism if the gut remains leaky and inflamed. The gut is not just a digestive organ, it's the largest immune organ in the body, the root of both inflammation and repair. When you heal it, you switch off the internal alarm, restore metabolic intelligence, and allow the body to shift naturally back into balance. The path to effortless fat loss doesn't begin with calorie counting, it begins with calming the gut. Food is chemistry, and every bite you take either fuels inflammation or cools it. The body is constantly responding to the information it receives from food. Nutrients, fats, and phytochemicals act like molecular signals that tell your immune system whether to stay calm or go on the attack. When you understand this, eating becomes less about restriction and more about communication, sending the right messages to restore balance. Anti-inflammatory nutrition isn't a fad or a detox. It's a daily strategy to bring the immune system back into peace so your metabolism can function as nature intended. The foundation of this approach is omega-3 fats. These essential fats are found in wild fish such as salmon, sardines, and mackerel, as well as flax seeds, chia seeds, and walnuts. Omega-3s are precursors to compounds called resolvins and protectins, which literally switch off the inflammatory response once healing is complete. They counteract the effects of omega-6 fats, which in excess tend to drive inflammation. Modern diets are heavily skewed toward omega-6 sources, vegetable oils, fried foods, and processed snacks, which is why balancing this ratio through omega-3 intake is critical. By calming immune signaling, omega-3s help restore insulin sensitivity, lower triglycerides, and promote fat burning instead of fat storage. Next comes antioxidants and polyphenols, the colorful compounds found in fruits, vegetables, herbs, and teas. These molecules neutralize free radicals. Unstable particles that cause oxidative stress and fuel inflammation. Berries, green tea, turmeric, olive oil, cocoa, and brightly colored vegetables are especially rich in these compounds. Turmeric's active ingredient, curcumin, is one of the most potent natural anti-inflammatories known, capable of reducing cytokines like IL-6 and TNF-alpha. Similarly, the polyphenols in green tea, EGCG, and olive oil support mitochondrial efficiency and reduce inflammatory markers. Eating a wide spectrum of colors, reds, greens, blues, yellows, purples, ensures you're feeding your body the full range of antioxidant defenses it needs to stay resilient. S-magnesium is another powerful anti-inflammatory nutrient often overlooked. It regulates hundreds of biochemical reactions, including those that control blood sugar, nerve function, and muscle relaxation. Chronic inflammation and stress deplete magnesium rapidly, and deficiency drives up cortisol and impairs insulin signaling. Leafy greens, avocados, almonds, pumpkin seeds, and mineral-rich water are excellent sources. Restoring magnesium through food, or supplementation if needed, helps the nervous system relax and signals to the body that it's safe to move out of survival mode. So vitamin D plays a critical role in immune regulation and fat metabolism. It acts more like a hormone than a vitamin, influencing the expression of over 1,000 genes, including those involved in inflammation and insulin sensitivity. Low vitamin D levels are consistently linked to obesity, metabolic syndrome, and autoimmune disorders. Adequate sunlight exposure and dietary sources like eggs, liver, and fatty fish can help maintain optimal levels, but many people require supplementation, especially during the winter months. When vitamin D levels are corrected, inflammation subsides, energy improves, and fat burning becomes more efficient. The goal is not only to add anti-inflammatory foods, but also to remove the pro-inflammatory ones that continually trigger immune activation. Refined carbohydrates, white flour sugar, and sweetened drinks create rapid spikes in blood sugar and insulin, leading to oxidative stress and fat storage. Processed seed oils such as corn, soybean, and sunflower oil are rich in unstable omega-6 fats that oxidize easily and produce inflammatory compounds. Trans fats found in baked goods and margarine disrupt cell membranes and amplify cytokine production. These foods keep the inflammatory fire burning, blocking the very pathways needed for healing and fat release. When you replace these triggers with whole, unprocessed foods, the chemistry of your body changes. The immune system quiets down, cortisol levels drop, and mitochondria regain their ability to produce clean energy. The body stops interpreting every meal as a potential threat. Stable blood sugar prevents the rollercoaster of hunger and fatigue, while steady energy supports consistent fat oxidation throughout the day. Over time, this way of eating retrains metabolism, improves gut function, and restores hormonal harmony. Dr. Myhill often reminds patients that this is not a diet, but a lifestyle, a long-term re-education of the immune system through food. There's no need for perfection, just consistency. Every anti-inflammatory meal teaches your body safety. Every skipped processed food gives your mitochondria a chance to repair. Within weeks, inflammation begins to cool, energy returns, and weight loss follows naturally. You're no longer forcing the body to change. You're creating the conditions for it to heal itself. The message is simple yet profound. Food is the most powerful anti-inflammatory medicine we have. Eat in a way that reduces immune irritation, stabilizes hormones, and supports cellular repair. When you do, the body's built-in wisdom takes over. Fat loss, energy, and metabolic health are simply the natural outcomes of a system that's no longer inflamed. Healing inflammation is not just about what we eat, it's about how we live. Every lifestyle choice either fuels or cools the inflammatory response. Nutrition lays the foundation, but the body's chemistry is also shaped by sleep, movement, sunlight, fasting, and the ability to rest. These daily habits determine whether the immune system stays in a state of alarm or peace. When these areas are neglected, inflammation persists no matter how clean the diet is. When they're restored, metabolism begins to heal naturally. Sleep is the most powerful anti-inflammatory tool we have, yet it's the one most people underestimate. During deep sleep, the brain clears inflammatory waste, the immune system recalibrates, and mitochondria repair themselves. Poor or fragmented sleep raises inflammatory cytokines like IL-6 and CRP, disrupts insulin sensitivity, and elevates cortisol, a perfect recipe for weight gain and fatigue. Even one night of sleep deprivation can increase hunger hormones, reduce leptin sensitivity, and impair glucose regulation. Prioritizing consistent, restorative sleep allows the body to switch from fight or flight into repair mode. Early nights, reduced blue light exposure, and a cool dark room are not luxuries. They are anti-inflammatory medicine. Fasting is another way to reduce inflammation and reignite metabolic health. Periods of time without food allow insulin levels to drop and cellular repair processes, known as autophagy, to activate. During fasting, the body clears damaged proteins, dead mitochondria, and inflammatory debris. This rest from digestion lowers oxidative stress and helps recalibrate hormonal signaling. The mistake people make is treating fasting as a punishment. In reality, it's a biological reset, one that should be paired with nutrient-dense eating, not deprivation. Short daily fasting windows, 12 to 16 hours, can dramatically reduce inflammation, improve gut function, and promote fat burning without compromising energy. Movement also plays a critical role, but not in the burn more calories sense. Gentle, regular movement such as walking, stretching, or low-intensity strength work helps regulate blood sugar, improve lymphatic drainage, and oxygenate tissues. Exercise acts as a mild, temporary stress that teaches the body resilience. Too much intense exercise, however, can raise cortisol and worsen inflammation in already fatigued individuals. Dr. Myhill often emphasizes movement as medicine, not punishment. Small amounts of activity done consistently, ideally outdoors, where sunlight adds another layer of healing. Sunlight exposure is fundamental for immune regulation and mitochondrial health. It triggers vitamin D synthesis, supports circadian rhythms, and improves nitric oxide production, which enhances blood flow and oxygen delivery. Sunlight also directly influences the mitochondria, the tiny engines in our cells responsible for energy production, by stimulating the release of ATP and balancing the autonomic nervous system. Morning sunlight helps lower cortisol naturally later in the day, promoting better sleep and calmer inflammation cycles. Even 10 to 20 minutes of outdoor light exposure daily can have profound metabolic benefits. Hydration is another overlooked factor in inflammation control. Water supports detoxification, nutrient transport, and mitochondrial energy reactions. Dehydration thickens the blood, slows lymph flow, and makes it harder for the body to clear inflammatory waste. Proper hydration with mineral-rich water, balanced electrolytes, and natural salts keeps cells functioning efficiently. Chronic thirst is often a sign of low-grade inflammation itself, the body's tissues holding onto fluid as a protective mechanism. Drinking consistently throughout the day, especially during fasting periods, keeps the internal environment clean and metabolically flexible. Mitochondrial support ties all these habits together. Mitochondria are not just energy producers, they are inflammation regulators. When they're damaged, the immune system becomes unstable. Mitochondria thrive on oxygen, nutrients, rest, and gentle challenge, the very things that proper sleep, fasting, movement, and sunlight provide. Supporting mitochondria through targeted nutrients like coenzyme Q10B, vitamins, magnesium, and carnitine enhances the body's ability to convert food into energy without excess free radical damage. A healthy mitochondrion is calm, efficient, and lean by design. When these lifestyle foundations align, inflammation begins to dissolve. The immune system no longer perceives danger everywhere. Cortisol levels fall, insulin sensitivity improves, and fat metabolism switches back on. The body starts using stored fat for energy rather than hoarding it for protection. What once required enormous effort, dieting, pushing through exhaustion, fighting cravings, begins to happen naturally. Energy increases, mood stabilizes, and the body returns to its preferred state of balance. Dr. Myhill's message is that you don't heal by forcing the body into submission. You heal by restoring its natural intelligence. When you sleep deeply, eat real food, move often, and live in sync with the rhythms of nature, inflammation quiets on its own. As the immune system calms, metabolism awakens. The shift from fat storage to fat burning is not a trick or a biohack. It's the body remembering how to function properly. Healing inflammation and healing metabolism are the same process, and when that happens, the body no longer struggles. It thrives.